What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the broader markets. I'm going to break down some important news that came out for NIO that caused the share price to drop, and why tomorrow is going to be a big day since we have big data coming out. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. So NIO had a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. This was favoring upside for a nice breakout for 6.4, but then we got some bad news that came out. Unfortunately, NIO took a dive today because they have sold $1 billion worth of stock to the public in an effort to raise money so it could develop new models amidst a lot of the sales figures that have been what the media describes as struggling. But there have been a lot of improvements in their sales, so I wouldn't necessarily say they're struggling in that regard. Compared to other companies that have seen declining sales, their sales are not actually declining, they're going up. Their earnings weren't the strongest, but we are seeing some improvements in their overall guidance and stronger potential numbers. So overall, still good, but with all the competition in China and because of the fact that they need more cash to really offset some of their balance issues, that's why we're going to see a dilution so far. There's negative headlines coming out. They announced a $900 million equity offering that's an 8 to 9% dilution to strengthen its balance sheet. Not the best of news for the short term, but this does create another buying opportunity. And I just want to say that, with profitability around the corner, I still think that this is another opportunity to load up on shares if we do start to dip lower. Now, their ES6 is still getting lots of attention, which is good news. And other analysts are still downgrading NIO to a hold rating. On top of this, the price price ratio is kind of dipping a little bit more. That's basically telling us that for now, we are showing some weakness compared to the market. Historically, Thursdays tend to be green about 49% of the time, and there's not really much data coming out. With this dilution news, we are going to likely see the share price dip a bit more. Jerome Powell and the Fed have once again given us lots and lots of insights about what they're going to be doing moving forward. We're going to be looking for a cut most likely, but the problem is that we're going to be looking at the data to see what it leads to. Tomorrow, before the market opens, we have the CPI data reports. We're expecting all the numbers to basically be the exact same as before, except for inflation year over year. We're expecting a slight increase. So will this lead the market to bounce, or do we end up getting a rejection? The charts are showing some weakness. All item CPI has been a little bit hot, but the core has been kind of flat. So we're going to see if that ends up continuing. And right now, there's a 92% chance the Fed's going to keep rates, not keep rates the same. Sorry, they're going to cut by 25 basis points. 8% chance we get a 50 basis point cut. So we'll see how that goes. Besides that, we had Oracle helping the market launch. Tomorrow, we just have minor earnings like Adobe and such. And then when it comes to litigation, there's not really a whole lot going on, but so far, some of the federal judges have blocked President Trump's, firing of the Fed Governor Lisa Cook for now. But things could change as time goes on. The Supreme Court also announced they want to basically take up President Trump's appeal for with what happened with his tariffs. So now the Supreme Court are going to be reviewing everything. But as far as NIO goes, there's a little bit of weakness right here. We're now forming a distributive pattern. Heading into tomorrow, we need to get back above $6 to bounce. If we push to 5.8 or so and then reject, there's going to be a risk of us dipping to lower levels because of this stock dilution, which is not the best of news. So I do see a risk of a small bounce that could be coming in some downside. If CPI causes the market to sell off, that could also be negative for NIO. SPY has been on an uptrend, but be very careful as we have a rising wedge-like pattern. We need to get back above 655 to be bullish, but if we turn short and we end up getting a rejection below 650, I do think we dip to 645 or below, so be very careful. There's a rising wedge. Although we're still technically bullish, there is a risk of us forming a top, and we might see a temporary slowdown. So we might touch 655 and consolidate, but if we can't break above it, we could be turning back down for 645. On the QQQ, we're also on an uptrend technically. So just like this, we're on an uptrend, but one of the issues is that there is also a rising wedge forming here. So this could be indicative of us trying to kind of push, reject, and lose 580. If that fails us, we could be dipping to 575. On the IW, we need to hold above 2338. If we don't, we have 235 as our target. ES needs to hold above 5650. If not, we're looking for 65. 20 is our potential target. There's a slight bearish divergence. And then NQ is kind of flat right here. It did try to break out, but notice that this resistance is very tough at 24,000. We need to hold above that to be bullish. If we don't, we're going to be at risk of dipping to 23,700. Tesla rejected. It pumped only to reject. We need to once again get back above 355 to be bullish. If we lose 347, we're looking for a dip to fill that gap at 338. Nvidia pumped very nicely to about 180. We need to hold above this. If we don't, we're looking for 173. Apple is kind of rejecting here. We might bounce a little bit to 230, then we'll see if it rejects or not. Supermicro is trying to bounce, and now it's rejecting back down to 42.5. AMD may retest 157, then 155. Coinbase is also rejecting here. It could be dipping back down to 309 to 310. Amazon could retest 233, and we'll see if we reject back down to about 227. Let's look for 233 and see how we end up going. We have 760s resistance, and we'll see if we reject or not off this as we have a double top. So it might push to 760 and turn back down. Google's also rejecting, might be dipping to about 234. And then Microsoft is also likely going to be dipping to about 497. The VIX is trying to push. If we break 15.5, we're looking for essentially 16.43 is our resistance. So we're going to have to see what happens at least as time goes on. With that being said, there is a rising wedge-like pattern, but we could be dipping back down towards 650. If that fails us, we could be dipping a lot lower, so be very, very careful as time goes on. So there's a rising wedge right now, and we'll have to see what ends up happening. And we have to be very, very patient, at least nonetheless. So with that being said, the market might try to pop a bit before getting a rejection. We might see a pivot and a dip to 645 on SPY soon if we get a rejection. And NIO might bounce below $6. It might push to like 5.8 to 5.9. We're going to be looking for a dip back down, taking us back down to about 5.28 in case we end up turning south. So that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Get ready for CPI and just know there's some weakness on NIO due to the dilution news. Thank you for listening. I'll be back with another upload very soon. Have a good one, guys, and peace out.